Yeah, well, joining us now is Henry Bolton, who's a border control expert. I mean, first of all, Henry, does this indicate that if Italy can do it, if Italy can send their migrants to a third country, then perhaps the UK might be able to follow suit and the Rwanda plan will finally, literally, take off?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the first thing to say about this plan, though, is that the Italian Ministry of Interior claims that it doesn't know anything about it, and initial indications out of Albania is that they're not too sure what it's about either. So whether this is actually happening or not is one question. The other, but if it does go ahead, of course, it is effectively the Italian version of the Rwanda plan, which then kind of begs the question, why, if the UK has been signing agreements with Albania, why haven't we been discussing doing this sort of thing with Albania instead of Rwanda, which is obviously a lot further away and a lot more expensive to send people to? But if this does go ahead, then of course it is, as far as I can tell, in almost exactly the same category legally as the Rwanda plan. So if one goes ahead, then the other should go ahead as well. Now,
don't forget, Henry,
I think there are a lot of stumbling blocks.
We're also hearing that that Germany, of all countries, is also considering its own Rwanda-style plan. So Britain was vilified for the Rwanda scheme. You know, inhumane. How could you, for your fellow human beings, etc. But now more and more European countries seem to be concluding that it's the only way forward. Germany is saying we have far too many migrants coming into this country. So therefore, it might not just be the Rwanda scheme happens. Other countries might get schemes going as well.
Indeed, Kevin. And it's not just Germany and the UK and Italy. It's Denmark and Sweden as well. You know, Sweden's pretty much locking down. Denmark's looking at various options for outsourcing this. But, you know, I've got, you know, if I was advising government, I would also be sort of looking at the implications of all of this, because the flow will continue. There's no doubt about that. There might be some deterrent effect, but the flow into the European Union, the European continent, will continue. So, you know, we can't keep doing this. For one thing, it will. For countries like Albania, it'll eventually they'll reach a capacity. There will be destabilisation there, and indeed, some of these they are economic migrants. The majority of these, even if they left somewhere for reasons of drought or warfare, but they become economic migrants. There's a sort of choice for them to come to Europe to an extent. Now, some of them are vulnerable. And in countries like Albania, with a very serious organised crime problem, they become vulnerable to human trafficking as well. In other words, exploitation. So there's a whole range of different problems packed up in this. And so what I'm saying, Kevin, is whilst this is a firefighting measure, and hopefully it will be effective. Hopefully Italy, Germany, Sweden, Denmark and ourselves will succeed in what we're trying to do here. But we've got to stop the flow. That's the core problem here.
It's the only way to do that, though, potentially, to just turn back boats. At one point, we heard Giorgia Meloni. I mean, it was part of her pitch to her own country when she was in her own campaign, that she said she would use the Italian Navy to turn boats around. My understanding is that she approached Ursula von der Leyen with this suggestion, and von der Leyen would far rather try and do a deal with Tunisia, which ain't worth the paper it's written on, frankly speaking. Look, this new potential plan to send migrants to Albania is basically going to be sending migrants to the hotspot where most of the people traffickers actually are. Surely Europe needs to wake up and actually deal with turning boats around rather than just moving migrants around like a game of musical chairs.
I agree. I mean, look, you know, it may have a deterrent effect, and it does ease the problem for the countries concerned, Italy, the UK, wherever. You know, that I agree with. But one of the problems that Albania has, or one of the businesses that Albanian organised crime is involved in, is moving men, women and children to places like Greece, neighbouring Greece, for sexual exploitation. And one of the problems that Albanian organised criminals have at the moment is sourcing such people who are vulnerable enough to be taken in by their sales pitch in the Balkans. So if you start bringing in an influx of other people who are vulnerable, disorientated, then they're going to be exploited by this. I have absolutely no doubt, and I've worked that region on the ground, countering organised crime. So that's for me a given risk of this. The problem is we've got to stop the flow, and this. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing this, and Italy shouldn't be doing it. They should. But we've got to stop the flow. We've got to stop the demand for this sort of thing. Now, can that be done? Yes, it can. By engaging with the countries of origin, where these people come from, by going after, and I mean hunting down ruthlessly, because they're responsible for untold deaths, the organised crime networks in the Sahel and the Maghreb and so on, who are responsible for this, for moving these people through North Africa to the North African coast. We need to hunt them down, and if necessary, kill them. We've got the assets to do it. We've got the resources to do it. We should be doing it. Second, but we need to remove the motivation for people to leave as well. But we've also then got to deal with what we do on our borders. And Maloney's absolutely right in terms of a more robust approach in the Mediterranean. She's being held back by the European Union, as you quite rightly said. And in the UK, we are lacking the political will to do it here on our
Can I just ask you about that for a second, Henry? Let me just ask you about this. Our Rwanda scheme. Of course, we're waiting for the Supreme Court's decision. It's taking an inordinately long time to reach this decision. No surprise there. The wheels of justice turn slowly. We're going to get the decision in mid-November, so probably within a week, couple of weeks. So the Supreme Court may, in a week or so, give the go-ahead to the Rwanda scheme. If it does, guess when the first plane is scheduled to take off? February the 24th. Why 3 months? If they give us the go-ahead, why don't we take a plane off the very next day?
Kevin, I've said this so many times. There is no operational structure and the resources aren't in place to implement this scheme. We should have those resources and assets already identified. The plan, if you like, the movement plan needs to be written up already. And, yes, there might be urgent resources. I mean, the RAF are ferrying sort of weapons to Poland for Ukraine and doing sort of various moving things to Cyprus in relation to the Middle East. Yes, but on the other hand, it's certainly not going to be a delay of very long to take these people by bus to an RAF airfield, put them on a C-17 or an A400 and fly them to Rwanda. That is not an issue. So why we're waiting, I do not know. It beggars belief. It is the incompetence in terms of planning and organisation in the British government, and I've said that throughout. That's the problem in a nutshell, or that's the base problem of why this isn't working, why our borders are in such a mess. It is because everything that our government does at the moment in the civil service is incoherent, badly planned, badly thought through, and doesn't have any strategic objectives at the end of it. There's no direction, and it's a problem.
So a lack of political will, I think, is what you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, Kevin, lack of political will is a major element. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in policing. We're seeing it in the city of London, in London at the moment, in relation to these protests. We're seeing it in every single walk of life, or in government delivery or public services. A lack of leadership, a lack of vision, lack of direction, a lack of organisation, and a lack of planning. And this can be solved, but not when you've got a civil service that are a closed shop. So, other countries will bring in expertise from outside, whether it's Romania, Estonia, whoever. I know these countries bring in expertise from outside to help them to deal with it. So why don't we? It is because we have got an arrogant, conceited, incompetent civil service. They may not like me here saying that, but that is the bottom line, Kevin. And it shames me to have to say it. But that's the reality. Until we address that reality, we're not going to improve. And, here we are. We're probably Italy moves people to Albania before we've moved anybody to Rwanda.
Yeah, it strikes me that they'll go to Albania and be moved on to the UK probably. And you talk about about coming down hard. Use some pretty, strong terms about how we should be dealing with some of the organised criminal gangs moving migrants through the Sahel region up to the coasts of North Africa that then end up in Italy and spreading across the continent, finally emanating on small boats from Calais. My understanding is that Wagner mercenaries have a huge part to play in this. Surely the government's only approach, that's going to be a big thing to try and deal with in Africa, the only approach is to actually defend a natural border we've got, which is the sea.
Indeed, and there are two things there. Just sort of briefly, I've worked across Central Asia, across Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, and to an extent in North Africa, dealing with this very problem. And in every case, the criminality involved is so organised and receiving so much funding through its activities that it is able to corrupt public officials, corrupt the state, corrupt the judicial system, and you are destabilising states. Now, it obviously works to the advantage of organisations in the past like Al-Qaeda and so on, Islamic State that still exist. You've got Hamas now in operating in various areas of the Middle East. You've got Hezbollah. All of these organisations, you've got the Janjaweed and so on down in Africa. All of them, without exception, and you mentioned Wagner, all of them are involved in people trafficking or people smuggling and human trafficking. And the reason is because it brings in the funding that they need to destabilise and control states. And so there's a lot more to this. And that's one of the reasons I say we've got to be far more ruthless and actually far more deadly about how we go after some of these people in these places. We need to consider them as terrorists. They are destroying lives, they're killing people, and they're destabilising states. Of that, there's no doubt. When it comes to our
Henry.
the channel...
We're just running out of time, but thanks very much for your time. Always a pleasure.